Hello, good morning everybody on a beautiful Sunday morning. I have here some slides about the expansion of the BRICS countries, which I would like to go through. So let's just jump right in. I have my coffee here, so it's a beautiful day. I hope everything's good on your end, and I think this is important, so let's just go through it. So the expanded BRICS group has almost half the world's population and will produce a further GDP. So recently the BRICS added 6 more countries to their group. The BRICS are Brazil, Russia, India and China. This is a big deal, I think personally. I don't know how the rest of the world views this, but it's a big deal in my book. The G7 is obviously the big Western nations. They exist as a bloc against the BRICS countries. The BRICS countries are excluded from this because the West thinks that they have moral superiority in the way they govern their countries. A democracy should be better than an autocracy, and well, you can have your own opinions about that, but the fact is that a lot of countries in Asia are growing also fast at the moment. Under autocracies, China has had an amazing run, and you can argue about whether people are happy there or not, but I think the only way we can really do that is by visiting ourselves. Personally, I've been to China just once. I think it's a beautiful country. Can't really speak about how happy people are. It seems to me like a very organized society where things were quite good. The nature is obviously beautiful, the food is great, and there is, just like in any place, there's very nice people. If you want to talk about the Communist Party, it's a different story. Obviously, being interested in these topics, I did try to ask, which is difficult. But yeah, Asia is a bit different. They have a different mentality. It's a paternal society where in Asia it's much more common to listen to your parents and be respectful, things like that. Keep to your own business. In the West, it's of course very different. But yeah, anyways, you can see in this screenshot that the new BRICS bloc will actually have a big percentage of global GDP, which is a big thing. So that shows how much the bloc is growing with these new countries that are being added. Just to go over the new members, there's 6 new members that are being added, which is Argentina, Egypt, Ethiopia, Iran, Saudi Arabia, and the United Arab Emirates. The original countries were, as mentioned, Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa was the last one that was omitted. Argentina obviously is a country with many problems. They have been screwed by the US dollar as far as history can remember. Interestingly enough, it used to be a very prosperous country when they started out, until they did a bunch of overspending, and then they kind of got into inflation, which they never really managed to solve. Egypt, personally, I don't have a lot of background knowledge on Egypt. I have friends in Egypt and people that I know are related to Egypt. It's obviously also an autocratic country. There's a military dictator. It's always kind of like that. There's not really a democracy, but life seems to always kind of go on. Ethiopia, I guess, is the same. They have a democracy, but always some sort of fighting. Iran is, well, I think everyone knows how Iran is run. is also an autocratic state with fundamental Islamists in big power. And Saudi Arabia has the king, obviously, and United Arab Emirates is a very well-run society, which also has paternal qualities where there's these head of states that have a lot of power, but try to wield it responsibly. But let's just look at it economically, right? Economically, in the bloc, you have Brazil, Russia, India, China, South Africa, which is already huge countries, huge parts of the world. Then by adding Argentina, which is a big country, and most notably, I guess, is the oil countries that they are adding, which are big players globally. Saudi Arabia has so much oil you can't even imagine. They have trillions of oil. Russia has, to the latest estimate, I thought it was something like 70 trillion of assets total in their country, because they have Siberia, which is a huge resource which is untapped. Like if the ice melts and they manage to extract more resources there, there's no limit to what they can do if they can organize, of course. But let's jump right into the next slide. So the share of global GDP in PPP terms, the original BRICS were 33% of global GDP. The new BRICS are 37% of GDP. This would rise to 45% if they let in the remaining countries who want to join. The G7, on the other hand, is 30% of GDP, down from 45% in 1995. Which means that, the new BRICS are becoming a bigger part of global GDP. Then you have to remember that in the West, of course, we have growth in tech and all that stuff, but the growth in population is finished. I don't see this returning. Maybe in the US it's better. In Europe, it's not good. The birth rates are incredibly low. People are getting older. There's an inevitable demographic decline, which is a problem for economic growth because you need young people to work. And in Europe, what's going to happen, and a lot of G7 is also Europe and Japan, which has the same problems. When your demography collapses, you don't have people to work, and what will end up happening is that all the young people will have to carry the burden of, one, their children, which is already to anyone a burden because it takes a lot of effort and time. And then you have to take care of your parents who are now old, and there's a huge wave of retirement happening now in Europe specifically, and this will continue to happen, but there will not be enough people to replace it. So the question then becomes, obviously, are robots going to replace it? And AI, is that like the future? So is it like some future where we kind of hang out with a bunch of old people and play bingo all the time, with the young people working? Or will they do some basic income for people? All this is the question. Meanwhile, other parts of the world don't have this problem. They are in a growth trend. So a country like, let's say, India or Indonesia, there's a huge amount of energy, and Africa too, a huge amount of energy, because there's a lot of young people, and these young people want to work, and they are also entering, of course, the online workforce. So even to the Western person that thinks he can compete, there will be someone in Africa working 3 times as hard as you. So if it's all online, then good luck competing, right? So yeah, on the right you can clearly see 1995, the size of the BRICS and how it's rising. I think, if you had statistics in college or school, then you can see that this is a big deal. All right, let's check the next slide. So this is more of the same. This is the rise GDP based on PPP share of the world. Yeah, the BRICS rising. So let's check this overview. The new BRICS strength, 45% of global oil production. So the BRICS together have 45% of the global oil production, which is huge. It's almost double of what the G7 produces, despite USA still being the global leader. And then if BRICS add Venezuela, Algeria, and Kazakhstan, it might control as much as 90% of all oil and gas traded globally. OPEC is effectively run by Russia and Saudi Arabia, who are also in the BRICS. 5 of the world's 6 biggest food producers are in the BRICS, which is China, USA, Brazil, India, Argentina, and Russia. 46% of the global population. G7 has less than 10% and dropping. 36% of global landmass, which is also huge, of course, and you can see the map on the right where the BRICS are gaining big territory. Yeah, what I'll say, let's start from the first point. The global oil production is, of course, a big thing. In the West, we are all very worried about climate change and what this may bring. Climate change is, of course, it might be an issue, it might be not. This is a different debate, but fact is that people in Europe are very worried about this, people in the US are very worried about this, and the rest of the world is not. They can say they are to pretend, but they aren't. They are worried about growing their country, maintaining their population just like any other country, and they want good things for the children, good things for the families, and the West thinks that countries in Asia and Africa and wherever should all put solar panels on their roof because we want them to. Well, I don't think this is going to happen. So oil production is still the basis of the economy, whether you like it or not. So this with this switch in the BRICS, I think this adds huge power to their union. And then you can argue that, but legislatively they didn't do any rules yet, and they can't agree on anything or whatever, and I guess we'll see. But if you look at the landmass, it's a huge deal. So if they add Venezuela, Algeria, and Kazakhstan, it may control 90% of oil and gas traded globally. Yeah, this is also, I think, a huge deal. People are tired of the dollar. I think it was the president of Brazil who said, the only thing that keeps me up at night is why are people trading in US dollar, and can we do it differently? So we'll see how that happens. Then you have OPEC, of course, which is run by Russia and Saudi Arabia. The West always tries to push their own thing in that regard, and it never works. Okay, we'll just go to the next slide to wrap it up for YouTube. So the 5 to 10 year goal is to allow BRICS members to settle trades in local currencies, not a reserve currency, but a way to bypass the dollar complex, break the petrodollar monopoly. And there's the quote from the Brazil president on the bottom left. And you can see that they're all going to trade the way they want to. They're going to do things the way they want to. And we in the West probably can't really stop them from doing it unless we want some war, which I doubt will happen. So it's a really interesting development. So I hope you learned something about this, and feel free to discuss anywhere in the comments or follow for more, of course. And I'll finish my coffee and see you guys next time. The last one. Drivers of BRICS, weaponization of dollar, is key driver, US seizing foreign reserves, US widely imposed sanctions, US limiting SWIFT. That's all for today. Cheers.